The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André, your podcast host. Big thanks to Luca the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers, and big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again. Today in the show, I talk with Dan McDaid, who is a super cool artist and a super fun guy. I mentioned sometimes when you have conversation with folks and you just click, and this was certainly one of them. Me and Dan have a great talk. We kind of talk about a little bit of everything, going through his career and some of the amazing comics he's worked on, and the bright future ahead. And man, I had fun. This is probably one of the most fun conversations I've had in a while. I love all the conversations. Let me say that. I don't want it to sound like I have favorites, because I don't. But sometimes when you talk to someone and your personalities are just click. And I feel like with Dan, it clicked instantly. It was a ton of fun and a great chat. And I feel like you'll probably feel the fun radiating as you listen to the conversation. I know I did when I was having it. So big thanks to Dan for being available with his time. I am still chugging along in the day-to-day life. I recently started watching Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on Disney Plus, and now I'm a massive Spider-Man fan, obviously. I've talked about it many, many times. I've talked to people that have worked on Spider-Man, and I have many questions and comments about the series when we talk. So when this show started, I watched the first episode, and I was like, well, it's just back in high school, and it's like high school stuff all the time. There's no sign of a supervillain. It just seems like, I know they were going to come, but it's all like in the realistic world, and reminded me a bit of the Ultimate Spider-Man thing, where he's just chugging through school, and I was like, I just want him to be a superhero. Just like the 90s series. Not saying that that's the epitome of the best Spider-Man thing ever. I often talk about the Spectacular Spider-Man series, which was him just going to school, but it was really well done. I've continued watching it, and it's really opened up, and it really has a real reverence and a real love of the source material. They find interesting ways to incorporate really obscure elements of Spider-Man's comics. As I'm currently watching it, we're seeing all of the Identity Crisis costumes showing up, which is pretty cool. If you're a fan of Spider-Man comics, you'll be aware of that time where Spider-Man had various different personas and costumes he was doing while hiding the fact that he was Spider-Man but still trying to be a superhero. Dusk and the Hornet and Ricochet and Prodigy. And then later on, those costumes went to other people, and they formed a super team called the Web Slingers, which is also a really fun part of Spider-Man's history and of old comics, and they're really delving into that. The voice cast is really cool. Coleman Domingo does the voice of Norman Osborn. I do like that actor quite a bit, and I do very much like what they're doing with it, setting things up and having him work with Spider-Man to get things going. I feel like that's a few spoilers, nothing too monumental. But they do really seem to have kind of a reverence for all of the comics, and incorporating other people into school. Nico from the Runaways is a character, and there are a lot of others too that kind of pop up. So yeah, I'm really digging it. They're doing something quite different. It's really fun. My friend Davin, that I do the X-Rated podcast with about the X-Men shows, told me to give it some more chances. When I didn't poo-poo the first episode, but I just wanted more. And I got it, so I do have to tell Davin he's right. Davin, I know you listen. You're right. And I really, really dig the show. And as I'm recording this, I'll be talking to Davin tonight on our other podcast. So I'll tell him then. But I just feel like it's a nice little nod to tell him now, because I know he's a listener. But, yeah, great show. Go check it out if you love Spider-Man as much as I do. If you just love fun superhero comics. And, the versions of them that show up on TV and in movies, then this is it for you. Go watch it. It's fantastic. Another thing you should do is listen to this episode starting now. My fantastic and super fun conversation with Dan McDaid. It's cool. It's an audio only podcast, so if your video doesn't
Okay,
work, it's
that's
fine.
fine.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
I
sorry
can.
you can't see my beautiful face. I look
I
great today.
I imagine you do. I would love to see
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I saw a facsimile on the internet. And that's fine.
That'll have to do.
I don't I'll have to do for now. You can see me though, right?
I can see you. This
Cool.
is
All
it's
right.
very strange. It's very strange.
Oh,
And
that's all
I've
right.
done my hair. My hair looks great. My hair looks the best it has all day. So,
I feel like
but
you could make up anything now. You could be like, I'm wearing
oh, I
like an
could. Yeah,
Armani
I am
suit.
completely Andre. I'm completely nude.
Oh my God. This is
It's that
incredible.
kind of cool.
This is incredible content. I'm missing all of this.
Yeah, it's imagine it suddenly came on now. I should warn you though, is that every time we've sort of tried to do this, something's come up. And today, about 15 minutes before, like you sent the link there,
Hmm.
I started getting a cough. I'm like
Oh,
this, surely not. But
oh,
it's
it's
just because I've just done the hoovering and my body's not used to really any kind of exercise at all. So
just shutting down from the
it
vacuum.
is, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's trying to cope.
Right on. Well, no worries at all. I'll try to soldier through.
Yeah, are you sure you can hear me all right?
Oh yeah, excellent. Yeah, you sound
Yeah,
great.
brilliant, brilliant.
Awesome. So you called in from England, right?
Scotland.
Oh, Scotland. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah. I'm English, but I live
Okay.
in Scotland.
What part of Scotland?
Dundee. It's on the River Tay. It's very pretty.
Oh, wow. I've been to Scotland. I never made it to Dundee.
Where
But
did you go in Scotland?
2019, just before the world blew up.
But
Uh, oh,
whereabouts?
where?
Edinburgh?
Yeah, we flew into Edinburgh and then we went to Inverness and
Mm,
Oban. And I really liked Oban. Oban was nice.
mm.
I feel like there's one other small town and then into Glasgow. And then we flew from Glasgow to Ireland and then did a week in Ireland
Nice.
as
Oh,
well.
that's lovely. That's
Yeah.
lovely. Where did you go in Ireland?
We just stayed in Dublin, but we did day trips all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in Scotland, we did the Isle of Skye. Like we did a day trip too. I think from that came left out of Inverness. No, not Inverness. Maybe it was Inverness. I can't remember now. But
I
yeah,
think if Americans or Canadians, you're Canadian, I think,
I
right?
am. Yes, I live in Nova
Yeah.
Scotia.
If they want to see a lot of old buildings, Scotland is the place to come and see them because they're really densely packed here. It's like every other building is a castle, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, the one thing that I thought we got a blast was when we first got there. Um, we were looking at like stuff to do in the area, and there's a ghost tour, and we're like, "Well, that sounds fun. Let's go do that." And it was kind of lame. Like it was like they were walking around and being like, "Well, so like the woman kept talking about how like she senses energy, and that like people have been ill on her walk before because like
That's
the ghosts are like affecting them and my wife wasn't feeling well because of like the travel but so when we went down into like a crypt like it's all damp and like wet and like like the air's not great but it's my wife was just not feeling well and was like I
yeah.
gotta tap out now, we gotta leave, and Jen just told him that like we're leaving. And as she told him we're leaving and we walked away, I like leaned over and I was like, this woman's going to use you as an example from now on about how,
Oh no.
yeah, because she
That's
mentioned
right,
other, yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
This Canadian woman came in
Yeah,
and she
exactly.
really felt this sort of evil that is bound in these walls,
Yeah,
and she got
that's,
sick.
yeah, that's
And
exactly it.
that proves it's real.
Exactly. There's
Yeah.
no other
But you
explanation.
know what? What I would say about that, Andre, is it would be a much worse ghost tour if you went round and the lady was just taking the piss and going, "There's no," like she had a cigarette, she was smoking a cigarette, like, "There's no ghosts. Why are you here? Don't waste my time."
That was actually
Like
one
if
of that was one of my favorite parts when we went to Loch Ness because they had a boat tour, but it was like really storming that day, and
yeah,
we couldn't take the boat. So like we just stood on the edge of the water, and we took like a little rock each or whatever, and we drove down there. I rented a car to get there, so I drove down the road to like the museum, the Inverness, like the
yeah,
Loch Ness Museum, and there's like a video, and you look around, and I'm watching the video, and at the end they're like, "Is there anything in there? Probably not. It's likely,
no,
And it's like I love how even the tourist museum is like, it's all bullshit, but whatever.
yeah,
You're here, we
yeah.
got your money, yeah."
No, all you're gonna see if you visit Loch Ness is a really, really, really big loch. That's all
Yeah,
you're gonna see.
yeah,
That's it. There's nothing in there. I mean, it's interesting. It's
hmm,
cool. It's huge. It's really, really big.
yeah,
But like, even if there had been a dinosaur there in like, oh, whatever, the
yeah,
1910s or whatever, I mean,
yeah.
that is going to be old as shit by now. Can you swear on this? Have you
Oh,
started?
yeah, no, yeah, oh, yeah. We started. You can swear away, swear
Oh,
away.
that's cool. Great. Yeah. Well, I'll say it then. The dinosaur's going to be old as shit by now. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
see it. kind of like looming out of the water and terrifying the sheep or anything like that, you know.
One of my favorite parts of that was like in the video they talk about how like there was this big rumblings in like I don't know what year it was, but that they'd seen the shape of something that looked like a plesiosaur in the bottom of the lake,
Yeah.
and they did all this work to get down to it, and all it was they'd filmed like a movie where there was a monster in the lake many years before, and they
Yeah.
just sank the prop they used for the monster to the bottom of
Yeah,
the
that
ocean.
rings a bell. Honestly, the world is so disappointing when you get right down to it, isn't it?
I
Like,
know.
you know, like up to about a certain age, maybe about 10, the
Mm,
world is full of like, oh, let's say 12, the world is full of sort of mysteries and possibilities.
mm,
And then the
mm.
older you get, the more like everything's a prop at the bottom of the ocean. You know, it's like, this
Yeah.
sucks, man. Like,
There's a
what
part
do
of
they trade this in for? You know what I mean? Terrible.
there's a part of me that really wants to, like that wants to believe in Bigfoot, that wants to
Yeah,
believe in
yeah.
heaven, that wants to believe in, aliens. I mean, the alien thing, I'm still okay on that one. I'm like,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
the
No, I think
universe is huge.
yeah, yeah. There's possibilities, and I think there's possibilities where it comes to ghosts and things. I'm not
Sure.
completely dismissive of it. It's just that you go on and on in your life. Like I'm like in my late 40s now, and you don't
Hmm.
see anything. You're like, oh, this blows, you know? What am I in it for, really? You know?
You just looking around at the sky, you're like, come on, just something.
Yeah, just
Just
anything. Yeah,
hiking through the Appalachian of the States trying to see Bigfoot, just a glimpse of something furry and be like, I saw it.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, so you grew up in England then?
Yeah, yeah. I grew
Okay.
up in a place called Cornwall,
Hmm.
which is another one of these places that's very kind of steep, like Scotland as well, very steeped in myth. All of it bollocks, all of it bullshit, none of it real. But you know, it does add a little. I guess it adds a little kind of piquancy to life. Yeah, and I lived there for like years and years, and then I moved to Scotland. I think I've spent about as long now in Scotland as I did growing up in Cornwall. I've been here for about 20 years now.
Oh
And I
wow.
moved here specifically. You did say the podcast has started, right?
Oh
We're
yes,
going.
yes,
Yeah,
100%.
great, good, good, good. That I moved here specifically. I told my boss at the time, well, he said to me, "Why are you moving to Scotland? It's cold up there." And I kind of knew that I'd visited already, and I liked it, and I had a couple of friends up here. And I told him I came up here, I was moving up to make comics. And eventually that is what I did. That is exactly what I ended up doing.
Oh wow. That's
Yeah.
excellent. It's
Yeah.
not
I
that
didn't really have
cold.
a strong, sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say it's not that cold. I mean, there are palm trees in certain parts of Scotland.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
where I live, Dundee is the sunniest place in Scotland, but
Mm.
that doesn't mean a whole lot, really, if I'm honest. It's
Well, when
still quite brisk.
oh yeah, well when I was there, it's funny because we did that Isle of Skye tour and they stopped at all these different spots. And one of them, I was talking to the bus driver. He's a nice guy, kilted dude, kind of telling us lots of stories. And we stopped somewhere, and I was like, because I was looking at the map, and I said, "Is Plockton near here?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's actually we passed through it on the way by. Why?" And I'm like, "Well, they filmed this movie I really love called The Wicker Man there." And I was like, "Dude, like," and he's like, "Oh, we can stop." And he stopped, and I got to walk around Plockton and look around and see where
Oh,
like
that's cool.
some of the exteriors for that movie were filmed, and there were palm trees there. And I was like, he was explaining that people planted them, and that as long as it doesn't go below zero, it palm trees can live. So
Yeah, and
that's
of course, as long as they sacrifice a virgin
yes, of course.
every year, the pine trees will be fine. As Lord Summerisle or a member of the
Yes,
Summerisle clan
that's
is there to
right.
watch over the island. Yeah,
Yeah.
God, no, that's a terrifying film. I don't want to get kind of sidetracked, but
No, we
Jesus,
can that this whole
that
thing is sidetracks. It's all good.
okay, cool. Every time I see it, and I don't watch it that much because I find it too frightening. It's not that there's no real supernatural element in it at all,
No.
but it's this sense of a trap that's closing in around him,
Hmm.
like inescapable. And then at the end, he has this dreadful appointment with the Wicker Man, and he knows he can't escape. There's nothing he can do, and it's got that sort of it's like Don't Look Now. You know the film
Oh
Don't Look
yes,
Now?
yes, I very much
That
know that
same
film.
sort of that
Yeah.
dreadful appointment with death that
Yep.
cannot be avoided. Like you can dodge it for a little while and you think you get away, but ultimately that's where you're going. And that's oh God, what a
Yeah.
movie.
It's movies like that that really resonate. I mean, of modern day movies, I feel like Hereditary and like Midsommar and those sort of movies. But Midsommar falls into that category of like they call it folk horror, where it's like,
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
happening in the woods. But the
yeah.
idea of the Wicker Man is even more disturbing in the fact that it's a group of people that all
That's right.
wholly believe that this is what they need to do,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
sure. That's
And
right. They're just
and
fanatics. They're
yeah, and
deluded fanatics, that's all. Yeah.
it's terrifying. And they even give them outs, like the girl that's naked singing through the wall. Like if he
Yeah.
had been with her her, he would have gotten out. But they needed
that's
someone.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
God, a number of times I've seen that film, and I never clicked that. If he
yeah,
had had sex with her,
yeah,
he would have left the island a free man. It was
yeah.
literally his only way out. My God. I never
They
thought that before.
and
Wow.
yeah, that's the one thing that resonated with me the most was like they needed him to be that pure of heart because that would make the
Yeah.
ritual better. If he would turn
Yeah.
that down, this gorgeous woman that's beckoning him to sleep with her.
Oh, what a
Uh,
crazy, silly bastard. My God.
yeah, I know that
Oh.
movie's wild, but that
Yeah,
fo
that's one of the rare horror films though where sex would have saved the protagonist as much.
yes, yes, that's a good
Right?
point. That's
Like
a very good point.
normally it's the virgin, the one who preserves their kind of purity. They're the
Mhm.
one that makes it to the end.
Yeah,
Like they're the kind of, but in this one he's like a doomed virginal knight,
yeah,
like
yeah.
has to go and face this kind of great folk horror. It is awesome. And like you say, there's no supernatural element, there's nothing supernatural that's driving
No.
them. They're just deluded. In fact, really, they're not even that deluded. They're just ordinary people
Yeah, they
in a
seem pretty
very kind of
reasonable.
isolated place.
Aside
They seem
from
what?
they seem pretty reasonable aside from the
Yeah,
Wicker
these,
Man thing.
these
Yeah,
they're sort of pleasant. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
Horrible
that
film.
that folk horror thing is one of my favorite subgenres of horror. Like when
Yeah,
weird monsters going in the woods. There's a British film I think called The Ritual that was on Netflix.
right.
Which I can't remember the name of the actor. He kind of plays a dick in a lot of stuff. I think he's
Is
Scottish.
it
I
called
can't.
The Ritual?
Yeah, The Ritual. Yeah.
I'll quickly look it up. Hold on.
Yeah. Oh, it came out in like I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think I've seen the poster for it. I haven't seen
Yeah,
it.
it's one of
Yeah,
the coolest
2017.
creature designs I've ever seen.
Oh,
Uh,
who is it?
yeah,
That looks.
yeah, that
It's just. Is it a bunch of British actors, or
yes,
is
yep,
it?
yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This seems like the sort of film my partner will have watched,
Oh yeah.
and then told me afterwards that she didn't like it very much. Um, the thing is I'm kind of a pussy where it comes to horror films.
Oh
I'm
really?
sort of, yeah, oh yeah, totally, yeah. Like I like them as an idea, and I like making horror, but I'm too easily frightened. Like I kind of sit there, kind of like tutting and shaking my head, going, "This is rubbish." And then afterwards, like when I go to bed and the lights are off, like the kind of like the horrors come back, and I'm getting worse as I get older. Did you see the Alex Garland film Men?
Oh yeah, yes, that
Yeah,
movie.
that's another folk horror.
I was thinking about that movie today, actually, which is
Yeah.
funny because it was my wife's birthday recently, and I collect Blu-rays, like movies and films I
Mm.
really like, and I picked up The Substance, which I'd already seen, um, with the one with Demi Moore that came out this year, but I really loved, and she hadn't seen it yet, so it's a movie that's about like aging and
Yeah,
the how society, especially as a woman in the entertainment industry, like once you start aging, you're just
finished.
yeah, pretty much. And so I thought, why not on my wife's birthday show her this movie that makes a horrific sort of story out of
Perfect.
female aging. But I was thinking about other weird ass sort of body horror movies, and the end of that movie is
Oh my God.
one of the most interesting slash disturbing. But I love the idea that I mean, I like Alex Garland a lot. I really like him.
Yeah.
But I love I would qualify that as folk horror as well. They sort of touch into
Sure.
that.
Oh yeah, sure. And I think it has some similarities with The Wicker Man in that
Mm,
it is another trap that is kind of slowly closing around her, and we don't
yeah,
really sense the kind of the dimensions of the trap, and neither does she until right at the end. But you're right, that end sequence, like up to a certain point, up to about say two-thirds of the way through the film, it's a very, very beautifully shot, almost comedy. There's a lot of
yeah.
good laughs in it along the way. Like
Oh yeah,
the guy who plays the only guy in it is very amusing in all of his different little roles.
yeah. Rory
And
Kinnear,
then
I think
the
his name's.
end is one of the most psychotic things I've ever seen in my life. And
Yeah.
I genuinely had to walk out. It was too much. It was too rich for my blood.
Oh really? Oh
Yeah,
no.
oh for sure. Yeah. And I think something about seeing it on the big screen as well creates this feeling of like intimidation, like where or being overwhelmed. Where if you're sitting at home watching it on your TV screen,
Hmm.
or God help you sitting and watching it on your phone, it's that bit easier to kind of put aside or look away or kind of remember the kind of context you're in. But when you're in this all black room and there's nothing in your field of vision except this, I'm going to spoil the film now a little bit.
Oh, go. It's like 5 years old. Go for it.
Yeah, right. This kind of like waddling, sort of pregnant monster thing that is constantly rejuvenating itself. And it's just like, I can't, what am I watching here? I feel like I'm going out of my mind. And luckily, I was in a place that had a bar. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the bar and I'll be back in about 5 minutes. And then I came back and I basically missed why any of that had happened.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say that's
I
like the
missed
end of the
main
movie.
theme. Well,
Did
that's not
you?
the whole point. I missed the whole punchline.
Did you look it up at least to kind of get
Yeah,
the? Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I asked the people that they were, that I was with, and they were like, no idea. No, they knew. They were like, yeah, yeah, it was him. It was him making his way back to her, so he could punish it. I'm like, all right, okay.
Well, the idea that like, yeah, that's a great read on that. But the idea that like, this village, all the men are the same men, and then it sort of posits
Yeah,
the idea that all men are the same
I'm the
men, and
same
that's
man. Yeah,
that, and
that's
that's and
right.
that's a very interesting, like especially from a female perspective,
Yeah,
because that
that's
movie
cool
really
and all,
does
but
show you that.
I don't really trust that from a male director. If I'm honest, I'm
Fair
slightly like,
enough. Fair enough.
okay, all right, mate. Well, maybe you're one of the good ones. Maybe,
Well, he
but
actually, speaking of like that group think, like that movie he did this last year, the Civil War, is like, you look at Pete. Have you seen that one? It's not really a horror movie,
no,
but
no,
it's sort of the idea of a American Civil War between.
yeah.
It's weird. He actually picked states that join up that you wouldn't expect it to join up. So it's
Yeah,
like,
doesn't he join up California and Texas or
yeah,
something like
Texas,
that?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. I don't see
And they
it.
don't tell you like what political side the president is. He's played by Nick Offerman.
Right.
You might be able to read into it a bit, but it's really sort of vague. But the idea of like, and obviously with things going on with the sort of demagoguery in the States now, it's like
Mm.
the idea of this like dehumanizing the other side and how we sort of treat other people and how we reduce them to less than human in our eyes because it makes it easier to
Yeah.
do what we really just want to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
that movie really kind of pigeonholes that idea and makes it even more terrifying. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I do think I know the internet is blamed for pretty much everything these days. And when I was a
Mm.
kid, TV was blamed for everything
Oh
and
yeah.
video games were blamed for everything. But I do think the internet has created this kind of siloing effect where we don't really treat any other human being as real.
No.
We're all just the protagonist in our own little stories,
Hmm.
and everyone else is a background character. I think it's almost it's less like watching TV or playing a video game and more like driving around in a car. You
Hmm.
know that that's sort of like dehumanizing. Like you don't look across when you're driving and you get sort of cut up or whatever,
Hmm.
and you don't see the driver. You see a car, so
Hmm.
you're sort of like, and you're alone in your own car. Do you know what I mean? We're all alone in
Yep.
our own little cars, and that's with the internet, we've kind of created that en masse for
Yeah.
everyone, and you can sort of pick and choose the reality that you live in, and pick and choose, and eventually you end up with this sort of dreadful tribalism where you're
Hmm.
all opposed to this kind of great unseen other.
Yep.
And it's kind
Yeah.
of worrying. I mean, it's more than worrying. It's fucking terrifying, if I'm
Oh,
honest.
I agree. You like
Yeah,
it's very easy to build your own little echo chamber.
yeah,
I made
yeah,
this joke before. I've kind of worked on a few jokes, and I always thought, kind of making a joke around the idea that like maybe back in the day when we all lived in a village, and say there was a guy that fucked chickens, and he's the one guy in the town that does it. Everyone knows he does it. They all shun him
yeah,
for this. They don't like him. They say like that guy fucks chickens, and then he might think, well, everyone hates me for this. Maybe I should reevaluate my choice. And now you can just go online and find a whole community of
yeah,
other chicken fuckers, and then it
yeah,
can make
yeah,
you feel
right.
validated and be like, yeah,
Yeah,
we're all right.
yeah.
Here's
And
my
then
community.
before you know it, they're a movement.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
you have to pay attention to them,
Yeah,
and they turn up and like, oh, not these chicken fuckers again, Jesus Christ.
yeah. Now they're a
Uh,
political party that are there.
yeah, and it's
Yeah,
like, no, hear them out, hear them out. I
yeah,
know they fuck chickens, but they're organized. They have a
yeah.
newsletter.
They're good people
Give
on
them,
both
you got to
sides.
give them time. You got to,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. No, that's
And
right.
your bad views on the world end up getting sort of validated, and you go, well, if all these other people
Hmm.
think this is true,
Yeah,
maybe it is true. So it's not
yeah.
true. It's not none of it's true. None of what you're thinking is true. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
I grapple with that too. Like the internet is so easy because you're not seeing a human, you're just seeing words. So you can just
yeah,
like say shit to somebody and not face any real world consequences. Not like
yeah,
going to the pub and arguing with someone at the bar. If it gets
yeah,
heated, he might punch you. And there's a real world,
yeah,
a real world thing that could affect you from what you've said or done. But with the internet,
yeah,
you can sort of all live in this magical world where nothing has consequences. And
yeah. And I think it goes even a little kind of deeper than that. I think what we do is we don't just read the internet, we read the internet in our own voice.
yes,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? So the voice that we're hearing back is really our own voice. So I think it's a great way to, I don't want to get, this is like tricky territory here, and I haven't really thought this through.
sure.
But I think it could kind of teach you sort of a degree of essentially the loathing that you feel is self-loathing
Hmm.
because what you're hearing is your own voice repeating back to you either things you agree with or things you don't agree with, and you're essentially angry at yourself, you know. And it's not like you're sort of saying there if you're face to face with someone, I don't think you even need the fear of consequences to kind of keep you in check. There's this sort of inner thing that sort of stops you being like an asshole.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
Because like we have to get along, right? We have to all find some way to get along, and you wouldn't. Yeah, it's so funny. Like people talk to each other on the internet. They're so fucking rude. Like I do
Oh,
it too. Like
and
this
mean.
real sort of shortness. You're like,
Yeah.
if I was in the room with this person, I would never talk to them. And I don't mean even someone who's on the opposite end of the political spectrum
Yeah.
or someone I'm angry with, but just being like blunt and dismissive. Like I would never talk to someone like that. You would try
Yeah.
and give them the time of day, you know?
Yeah. And I have a friend that's, an economist, and he is always going off. He's like, the other day he was like, doesn't it just make you angry? Like all the stuff that Trump's doing? I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, what are you gonna do? Well, he goes, you seem so calm. I'm like, yeah, because I can't do anything about it. Like what do
No.
you, he's like, well, shouldn't we try to change people's minds? I'm like, good luck. We can try.
Yeah.
But I struggle with the idea because there's a certain level of, and I don't want to like boil it down to, um, you know, upbringing or station in life or whatever. But I think a lot of what Trump and how Trump got to be where he was is reactionary to people that are in more blue collar places in their life that are frustrated with being talked down to by liberals or left
Yeah, no,
wing
I agree
people.
with no, that's right. I agree. Yeah, this anger has to come from somewhere. It doesn't come
Yeah.
out of the thin air, you
They
know.
feel like they're not represented, and we treat and people like talk down to them all the time and treat them
No,
like
that's
idiots.
right.
And like,
But also, I think there's a bigger problem that has led to this point, and that is the sort of poor standard of education
oh,
and
that too.
poor
Yeah.
social mobility. Like you're talking about these people who are kind of basically on reduced means, and their father was on reduced means, and their father's father, and so on.
Mhm.
That's like that's like sort of generations of poor education that's getting worse and worse
Mhm.
and leaving people in a position where they feel completely disenfranchised, they feel cut off from the world. And then, I mean, I think about the way the Democrats kind of like conduct themselves. And broadly speaking, if I was an American, I would be a Democrat.
Mhm.
But I see them doing their answer to everything is to have like a huge fundraiser with these
Yeah.
incredibly wealthy people. I'm like, you people do not get it. You don't
Yeah.
get it. You
No.
are driving people away. You're
Yep.
just kind of like, and now, ladies and gentlemen, here's George Clooney. No one gives a shit about George Clooney.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
these sort of these right wingers will bring up like somebody like Hulk Hogan, and
Yeah.
liberals like me and lefties like me will go, ha ha ha, that's funny. People fucking love Hulk Hogan, man.
Yeah, I know.
They
Yeah, I
still
know.
love Hulk
Yeah,
Hogan,
I know.
right? They were
Yeah.
right. Like that, he looked stupid up there, like ripped, like still
Hmm.
fucking ridiculously ripped like that weird long hair that he has,
Hmm.
wearing those tiny little sunglasses. He looked like a goofball, but it fucking worked. People
Yeah.
love that shit.
Oh
The
yeah.
Democrats and the left need to figure out once again how to have a popular touch. Otherwise, they are screwed,
Yeah.
screwed for a generation. Seriously, and it's very easy for me to say that over this. But anything, I have this sort of saying that I always say because I've got friends who are kind of like, oh, who cares what happens in America? But my view is, if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold.
Oh
So
yeah.
if it's bad there, trust me, it's coming here. It's going to be
Yeah.
here soon. Right?
Well,
We've
you
got our own
guys.
far right. Go on.
Oh yeah. No, I was gonna say you guys have had your own version of that. I
Yeah,
wouldn't.
sure.
What's his Boris there?
Yeah, Boris Johnson, Nigel
Yeah.
Farage. Yeah, we've got our own far right party that are
Yeah.
poised to kind of make a big, poised to take power, basically in
Canada
four
has
years'
one
time.
too. Canada has one too.
Yeah,
That's.
exactly right. And Musk is backing our guy to the fucking hilt, so it's going to be exactly the same rubbish over here.
Mhm.
So we're watching America and I guess you guys will be too, because you're like right on their border,
Oh yeah.
watching the degree of worry, like where's this going? You know?
Yeah. But I tried. I think it's for my own self-preservation and sanity. I try to compartmentalize in a way that says, well, I do what I can about it, what I
Yeah,
can,
yeah,
and just try
yeah.
to soldier on because I
Yeah,
don't know
no,
how else.
that's right. I kind of I confine myself to an occasional rant and then I stop because like when it all started to come out, like this week has been I think since last weekend when Musk and his Doge pricks kind of raided those offices,
Yeah.
like it's just been getting worse and worse. And what I've had to do, and I'm privileged in that I can afford to do this, is mute the people on my timeline who are really, really panicking about it. And I
Mhm.
understand why they're panicking about it,
Yep.
and I'm panicking about it too. But you cannot have that same panic note playing in your head
No.
constantly.
No.
And like particularly, I don't know what your sort of setup is, but I work from home by myself.
Yep.
I'm
Me
alone.
too. Me
Awful,
too.
right. So we're alone an awful lot of the time. And all you would have would just be these panicked, frightened voices in your head going, what about this? What about that? You
Hmm.
have to switch it off. At
Yeah.
some point, you have to switch it off.
Yeah.
And kind
Oh
of go,
yeah.
like you say, what can I do about it anyway? All you can do is cast your vote. That's
Hmm.
it. Oh, and
Yeah.
then when the time comes, you can march or
Hmm.
have a general strike, whatever. There's things that can be done. But like panicking in the interim, I don't know. Fear never got us anywhere. Do you know what I mean?
No, and it's all just weird, dumb, childish bullshit. Like Trump or
Yeah,
our Prime Minister Trudeau is not particularly favored among the people that would probably be Trump supporters if that was over here, you know.
yeah,
But you know they fly flags and put stickers on the cars say "fuck Trudeau." Like they're all over
yeah,
the place, and you're like, all right, you had the same vote as I did. I didn't like the conservative guy that was in power before. I didn't
no,
drive around with a flag. I didn't put a flag on my lawn that says "fuck Stephen Harper" or put a
no.
flag, you know, a decal on my car. It's like it's just it's like a temper tantrum. So
It is. It's driven by
yeah,
grievance, isn't it?
yeah,
And I think that is sort of broadly the difference between left and right. I think right is driven by a lot of bitterness and grievance and a lot of resentment that that these scumbags can really kind of tap into.
yeah.
These leaders can really tap into.
And
I
it's
don't say
also
the
like
left's better than the right. I mean, it has its
no,
problems, but like you, like I wanted Scottish independence, but I didn't put up a thing saying "fuck Boris Johnson" or "fuck this" or whatever. Or "fuck."
yeah,
I wanted to. I was
yeah,
very angry at them.
yeah,
I didn't necessarily want to kind of pollute my window with that, you know.
yeah. And it's tough. It's it's one of those things that like you have to try to figure out a way to function in it. And
Yeah,
yeah, my
yeah,
wife will like, hey, will be like, hey, did you see what Trump said? And I said, like, I watch the Daily Show, and that gives you my updates, and that's
yeah,
all I watch. Like, you know, they make
yeah,
it kind of
yeah,
funny so I can laugh a little bit along with it, and
yeah.
then go down with my life because otherwise I would
No,
just
I'm exactly the same. My partner will do the same thing. Sometimes she'll go, "Have you seen this?" And I'll be a little bit blunt about it. Even I'll be
mm,
like, I don't want to know
yeah,
because
yeah,
I've been basically steeped in this for a week, and
yeah.
I've reached the limit. I just want to watch some shit on TV. And there's another friend of mine who doesn't want to know anything about it
Mhm.
at all. Like he
Well,
doesn't want to hear a single word about it. Like, all right, that's, and I understand. I do get that.
yeah,
Anyway, do
100%.
you want to talk comics?
Sure. Well, speaking of which, I guess when did you first discover them? Like when did they come into
Uh,
your realm?
I've got a kind of a muddled kind of memory of that, and I think both things are kind of true. I remember reading a UK annual, a UK Superman annual in I think probably about 1980, 1981. I was born in 1976, so I would have been
Hmm.
about 4 or 5, something like that. And it was obviously DC. And I think that might have been the first comic thing I ever read, or the first comic thing that ever made an impression on me. It was a reprint of a story from probably Brave and the Bold. It was Superman, or maybe no, I think it was the other one. I think Brave and the Bold is the Batman one. This was the Superman one, which might
Oh,
be just team up or something like that. I don't
yeah, I
remember.
think so.
Yeah, I think something like that. And it was Superman teaming up with Martian Manhunter to fight Mongol,
No.
and written by Jim Starlin. So it had that big kind
Oh,
of cosmic sort of
beautiful.
widescreen sort of flair to it. But it terrified me. This is the thing. It absolutely scared the shit out of me because it was Superman in deep space, and Superman. I didn't really know at that point if I liked Superman or not. I think I might have seen Superman the movie on TV,
Mhm.
and it scared me because it's really quite a scary film.
Yeah.
And then I read this, and it really scared me because he fought the Spectre at one point. The Spectre's terrifying, and then the Spectre like calls in his sort of backup, and his backup is God Almighty, right? Like he basically says to Superman, "You've flown too far to save Supergirl. You've gone too far, and I'm here to tell you to stop." And Superman is going through this real arrogant phase. Or maybe that's just the way Jim Starlin writes him. He's
Mm.
like, "Get out of my way, Spectre! You can't stop me. I'm going to save my cousin." And he hammers Spectre, and of course Spectre can't be moved, and then he says, "Right, you got to calm down because my boss wants a word." And then out of the sky comes these beautiful, beautiful hand-drawn Caspar Saladino letters that are meant to be the word of God himself. And I was just like, I wouldn't have thought these exact words, but I was like, "Fuck this," and "fuck DC Comics." I never want to read any of this shit again. And
Well,
so, like, I was really frightened. And I think the same year I got a Batman annual that was also terrifying. I'm like, this is too much for
well,
me.
it's funny.
Uh,
Like you seem like a contemplative, person, and as a kid, I'm sure elements of that were definitely in there. But the idea, like, if you take apart any of those broader ideas in comics, like Galactus is the embodiment of hunger, or like the Spectre is the vengeance of God, basically.
yeah,
The idea that like you're literally fighting God, like or
yeah,
or at
that's
least an
right.
aspect of him, like the
Yeah,
cosmic the cosmic horror that comes from that to
Yeah,
contemplate it.
and remember as well, I'm Catholic, so I was going
Oh,
to Catholic school and church and all this kind of thing. So to me, these aren't fun, abstract concepts in a
yeah,
comic book. This
yeah.
is literally like holy writ. You know what I mean? That was terrifying.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was, and then my dad started buying me Spider-Man comic and Spider-Man
Nice.
comic. Again, these are reprints.
Yep.
And Spider-Man comic in the US was going through a really strong phase.
Mhm.
Roger Stern written issues and a mixture. It's Roger Stern and Bill Mantlo. It was kind of printing both.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, really strong run of comics with some really, really powerful early John Romita Jr. artwork. And this is around about the time, and I was kind of enjoying it, going, yeah, these are really good comics. And it was just week to week, it was stuff like Stiltman would turn up and Willow the
Mhm.
Wisp. And these are all like real Z-listers, you know.
Yep.
And suddenly there's this mysterious character rootling around underground, and he's got this green mask and pumpkin bombs, and it's the birth of the Hobgoblin. And then
Yeah.
I was just basically hooked. I was completely, absolutely locked in after
Yeah.
that, pretty much for
He's
life. So.
one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. And
Oh, he's fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah. So such a cool visual. And I even kind of like the way that they kind of fucked up the secret identity. Like I'm
Yeah.
still not really
And
like,
then
is it
like
Roderick Kingsley? Is
it's
it Ned
supposed to be
Leeds?
now, yeah. But it's still that's the
Yeah.
beautiful that it's you still question that.
Yeah,
It's
oh yeah, that's right. I don't they settled the issue once and for all many, many years ago,
yeah.
but I don't think they did really, and I
No.
think him being this sort of ambiguous sort of like Nightmare, who's got a real kind of like jonesing to hurt Spider-Man is really good and
Yeah.
just really cool. And then there's other characters like Jack O'Lantern. All of it's really beautifully drawn as well.
Yeah.
Um,
That was a super fun era for comics.
it is really really good, yeah. And in the UK, comics were printed outsize in the sort of magazine
Mm.
size. So if you're a child, you really feel like you're falling into the pages. They've got this lovely, really big kind of, and I have to say, I recently started buying a lot of these. I think as you get older and you start making some money, you kind of want to buy back the things
Mm.
that your stupid parents bought you then threw away.
Yeah.
So you want
Look
all that
behind
stuff.
me.
Yeah, no, I see it.
I
No, I see it. I know
understand.
that from a fellow
Yeah.
traveler. I get that.
Oh,
Um,
I have a library in our house. We bought this house. There was like the woman had a sewing room, and we turned it. My dad is a construction worker, and he came and built wall to wall bookshelves. So the
oh,
whole room is
nice.
just, and most of it is comics and graphic novels.
That's
Um,
cool.
but it's crammed. It's getting too full. I need a bigger house.
Yeah. And you'll
Yeah.
have to have the purge at some point. That's a dreadful
I know
day when you have
it's a
to have the
dreadful day.
purge. The
I,
trick is to kind of do what I do and keep a lot of it in boxes and then don't look at the boxes, but just take them to, I don't know if you have like Goodwill or charity
mm,
shops or whatever, just take them there and go, you can have these now. And that's good. And you never have to worry about like, because what will happen as you get older is that your memory will start to fail. You'll forget the books that you've bought and you're
mm,
like, I'm sure I have that book, but you'll never be sure. So
yeah,
so don't worry about it. So that's the thing to do. It reduces the pain. I
yeah.
remember years and years ago, I had to move. This was the first time I'd ever had to do this, and it really sucked. I was living in a flat at the time in England, and I had obviously a ton of comics. I've always had a ton of comics. And I remember when we moved out, I think it was fairly urgent. We had to move out fairly sort of quickly. So I had to have the purge. I remember this image will always stick with me. It was a copy. Threw out tons of comics into a great big a dumpster outside, or a skip, as we would call it.
Mm.
And I remember this beautiful John Bogdanove Superman cover sort of sitting on the top, and then the other stuff being thrown on. And it just kind of like a little bit of my soul died that day
Yeah,
because you kind of realize that you're not going to have this stuff forever.
yeah.
You'll always have to kind of purge, and these things are just kind of fleetingly passing through your life, you know?
Yeah. Well, I read a quote from I think it was God, what was his name? Echo, Umberto Eco. And it
Yeah,
was something along the lines of like, because like I have all these books and I look around and I have not I like to read novels too, and there's so many of those. And I'm like, um, will I ever read all of these? In the span of
yeah,
my lifetime? And then but I read some quote from him that said like, just being around them brings him such joy. And I
yeah,
was like, and it
right.
kind of does me too. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I get it. Yeah, I
yeah.
totally get it. I'd rather live in a house full of like unread books
Mhm.
than live in a house full of like just like empty shelves or no shelves. And I have been to people's homes like that, and I can kind of tell pretty quickly that I'm not going to be friends with these people,
Mhm.
not out of any kind of like smugness or
Yeah.
superiority, but just like I just don't see how your brain can work this way. Like I don't think our brains can mesh. If I look around, all I see is a handful of electronic devices and somewhere to sit and a TV. No books, no
Yeah.
shelves for books, no clutter even.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand this. No clutter. What's going on? Where's your clutter? Where's your stuff? And they're like, well, I don't have any stuff. And I'm like, but I can't be friends with you. I don't understand that.
Well, I
I've got to
think
have stuff,
it's I agree, and I think it's like like because I feel like I think as like me, you're probably the same in that it really says that you appreciate and value and love art of some kind.
Yeah,
If I look at your shelf and you have a bunch of Blu-rays like I do, or I collect records too, so you look at your record shelf, or I look at
yeah,
your bookshelves and it's like here's all the art that you appreciate and love, and you appreciate and love it so much that you're it's taking up space in your home that
that's right. Yeah,
if you
yeah.
don't value art that much or into a level that you can like have some of it lying around, then perhaps mentally we're not gonna gel.
No, no, we're not going to mesh necessarily. No, that's right. I have this recurring dream that I'm going to a shop, and it's a shop that doesn't exist. It probably did exist when I was a child, but not so much anymore. And they've got a collection of all the stuff that I love, like Spider-Man comics and 8-bit video games and
Hmm.
like real, like basically childish stuff, really.
Hmm.
But stuff that makes me very happy. And I think what I'm subconsciously doing is try, if I look around, it's a shame you can't see it, I'm looking around my room, is sort of trying to turn my space into that
Yeah,
shop,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like if I put my hand on something, there's something cool to put my hand on at all times.
yeah.
Um, so
It's
yeah,
cool too because you're right. Like the comic shops that I love going to as a kid, I feel like that room is kind of becoming that.
yeah,
And like we just went on a trip, my wife and I, to Mexico, and so like I picked a bunch of books to bring, and she just wandered around and then picked some books. So it's almost like she went to a library or bookstore and picked what she wanted out of the huge amount of books I have to read. So like
yeah.
I just kind of love that idea. Like a part of me that was like if I was super rich, I would love to like turn my basement or something into like a miniature Blockbuster video and just give my friend cards
Yes.
and be like,
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
rent books or come rent movies, take them, enjoy,
Yeah.
bring them
Right.
back.
Like get that kind of Criterion closet thing going on where
Oh,
people
I have
going, oh
many
yeah,
Criterions. I would love to have a
yeah.
Criterion closet. I have hundreds of them. Um, well, that's interesting that you kind of discovered comics through American stuff. Like,
Oh
what
yeah,
about
yeah.
like
So
the
don't read
British
Brits.
comics?
Yeah, no, I didn't get British comics until probably about 5 years after that. I want to say now that obviously I love DC Comics. What happened was that in the 90s, I kind of like I really got heavily into DC Comics. Weirdly, around about the same time that Roger Stern moved from Marvel to DC and
Oh
started
yeah,
writing Superman,
yeah.
right? And he brings exactly that touch, that kind
Hmm.
of soap opera, high concept touch with him, and it's immensely readable stuff. But anyway, hang on, I digress. Um, yeah, it was totally American stuff, and I feel like I've been very steeped in American things, and although I love British things as well, steeped in American culture pretty much since I was a little kid. I didn't really get any kind of Brit, like I didn't get into the Beano or the Dandy or any of the typical sort of. I kind of feel that British people who like comics, this isn't true anymore, but it was when I was a kid. They go down one of two tracks. They either get really into the kind of like when they're very young, they either get into the kind of really serious stuff
Mm.
and they grow along with that, or they get into the kind of humor stuff and they drop it when they hit a certain age. They drop it at
Mm.
like 10 or 12 and then they move on and they maybe don't read again or they get into books or whatever. And unfortunately, I got stuck into the first track where the comics I read were so good. Like I've never been able to let them go. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Like the other stuff is very well drawn and very, very funny and everything, but very disposable. But like I was like locked into like Simon Furman Transformers at that point, and
Mm.
um, still Spider-Man and Secret Wars, and this shit is like it's not like the Dino, the Dandy and the Beano. It's designed to be extremely addictive.
Hmm.
Each issue ends with a cliffhanger, and it demands that you come back, and those demands work. And I think you can sort of see that with how addictive Marvel movies became. This is why
Mm.
they were such big hits. Like some of them are really good, and some of them are mediocre, but everyone turned up for all of them because it was an unfolding saga. It was an unfolding text.
Yep.
And if you missed the next one, you were lost. You had to, and they were really addictive, and they would bring you back time and time again. And they did this unfortunate thing, which they had to do, but it's still they ended that with Endgame. Sorry, again, I'm digressing. I
No, no, no,
apologize.
no, no. Seriously, this is the great. This
They
is
ended it with Endgame, and everyone got to jump off. It's what like in comics a jumping off point,
Yep.
or in comics the jumping on point.
Yeah,
That was the
it's
jumping off point for
basically
a lot
like
of people.
they changed creative teams and now it's
Yeah, right.
that's
But
yeah,
also they so satisfyingly wrapped everything
yeah.
so neatly Everyone got a great ending. It
Yeah.
was very dramatically satisfying. He got to say Avengers Assemble after putting it off for so long. I remember the night I saw Endgame with my pals, and my God, like I've been cynical about the Marvel output because I think some of it is just, there to make cash.
Hmm.
But God, I was so excited watching Endgame. I absolutely popped for it. I thought I was going to explode.
Oh
I was
yeah.
so excited, and it's
I
satisfied on like every single level. But what a
Especially
great way!
myself, like I'm a huge Thanos fan. Always like I'm a massive
Yeah,
Jim Starlin fan. So like the
yeah,
fact that like Thanos got such a like he saw him in so many
yeah,
movies leading up to this, and then got such a cool. I mean, obviously they changed his motivations a little to make it more
yeah.
accessible to everybody.
But
I
it's
would
still
have,
very much the same guy.
yeah, it is, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I would have
The
loved to
characterization
see.
is exactly the same.
Yep, I agree.
I love what they did with him when, again, this is a digression. I love what they did with him when he had succeeded in what
Mhm.
he wanted to do.
Yeah,
And he just goes and sort of sits around a pot on
yeah,
some little kind of
yeah,
like lonely planet,
yeah,
just himself. And it's just like, this is awesome. Like he looks depressed.
yeah.
He has achieved everything he wants to do. But unfortunately, that created the perfect jumping off point for viewers. And everything that's happened since then has been more kind of piecemeal and none of it is really stuck.
Yeah.
I have a slight feeling that Fantastic Four is going to hit.
I'm
I
very
think,
excited for that. Very excited.
yeah. Um, the stuff I like about it, the stuff I'm not so sure about. I think it's amazing that the Thing looks like that. Like he
Yep,
really, really looks like the Thing. It's
yep.
fantastic. And Galactus looks great. I think there's going to be a bit of buzz, a bit of excitement around that. So
Oh yeah, I think that
we'll
I
see.
even love that the Red Ghost is in it. Like I'm like that's cool, like that's a pretty
That's
obscure,
unbelievable. That's
yeah,
yeah.
and I heard that oh what's his name, the guy from I Tanya, Paul Walter Hauser or whatever, the guy that played like he was in I Tanya, but he was in the Cobra Kai show too. He was
Yes,
in
I know that. I know the guy you
yeah,
mean. Yeah,
he's
yeah.
in it too, and they don't know who he plays. I'm kind of hoping it's Mole Man, but
Mole
we'll see.
Man.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, but we'll see.
Yeah, Mole
That would be
Man.
cool. I was always really hoping Paul Giamatti would play Mole Man or something. I'd be like, that would be
Yeah,
sweet. I love that
yeah.
guy.
He has that really frustrated
Yeah,
kind of energy, doesn't he? Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Someone who's been sort of excluded by the surface dwellers.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I can
100%.
see it. I can see it. And the guy they've got voicing Galactus is very good. Although the one
Oh,
thing I think is sort of wrong with the trailer that I saw was that the Thing should have a more kind of gravelly voice. It doesn't have to be really OTT, but it has to have a little bit more he's a man made of rocks, and he
yeah,
should sound more like a man made of rocks.
yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
but it does. But you know what it looks? It looks fresh.
Yeah.
And I like that. And it doesn't really look like anything else that's come so far in the sort of the kind of the Marvel universe. So
No, there's a part of me that sort of doesn't like, and this is just because I'm a continuity nut, that doesn't like that it seems to be in the same world as the rest of the movies. But I feel
does
like,
it?
well, it's like in the 60s.
Oh, but
Um,
I think it's a parallel universe. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
think
what I'm
it's.
saying. Yeah,
Oh,
no. That,
yeah,
yeah. So like, but I feel like Secret War is probably going to end up merging everything into one universe where
yeah,
X-Men and
yeah.
Fantastic Four and all them are together.
I think that's probably right. Yeah,
But
yeah,
so it's probably the start of that. But no, I'm I've always been a fantastic. I'm a massive Spider-Man fan my whole life, but Fantastic Four has always been there too, and I'm
yeah.
excited to see. I really like what I'm seeing, and I think You're right. It does feel really fresh and
Yeah.
different and
Now, I should
fun.
say I'm a bit more kind of skeptical about these movies, and I sort of sit there like I've got a couple of friends, and they just love all of this stuff
Yep.
unconditionally. And I sort of sit there going, oh, the writing's not good enough, or whatever.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
I want there to be a good Fantastic Four. I want there to be a good Superman. I want to be
No.
able to go to the movies and enjoy these things.
Yes.
I think the only thing that sort of upsets me about them is I don't want there to be too many of these things. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
know.
want there to be a glut. It cannot dominate the entire scene. I want there to be a nice, like, I think cinema and comics and every art form survives through diversity. So the
Hmm.
more diverse voices and the more diverse kinds of material you get, the better it is for the medium, and the better it is for the viewers as well. Like they get
Yeah.
exposed to more different things, they get their minds broadened. It can't be the same sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of pap.
Yeah.
One a better phrase. It can't just be member berries and hey, remember Herbie and remember this. There
Yeah.
has to be something rich there.
I agree.
But I'm
Well,
cautiously optimistic.
Well, the Marvel thing seemed better back before they got to Endgame because it seemed like everything was paced out a little more. You get a movie every year,
Yeah,
and then you go,
yeah.
you know. But now it's like with the shows and everything, there's just so much, so it's a lot
Oh,
to
the
keep
glut.
on
But
top
yeah, I
of.
think
Yeah,
it's unfortunately, I think it's the Disneyfication. I think I
yeah,
like the Marvel films a lot better before Disney came in, and I don't know what Disney is anymore. Like,
yeah.
I
I
don't
know.
know if you remember this, but when I was a kid, Disney was like they would put out one video release
Hmm.
per year
Hmm.
for a limited time only of a beloved film, like sort of like The Little Mermaid or The
Yeah,
Lion King or
it's
Aladdin or whatever.
out of the vault, out of the
Yeah, right.
Disney
And if
vault.
you
Yeah.
don't get it now, it's not coming back. It's
Hmm.
this is it. This is and obviously this was like just marketing spin, but they created this sense that their stuff was like little gems, little sort of like rare gems. And now the view is completely opposite of that. Just a glut,
Oh
a
yeah,
tidal wave
yeah.
of stuff. And I think that really hurt Marvel. Like suddenly you had to have watched three other TV series
Hmm.
to get what is going on in this movie. It's like, no, that's crazy. You can't make people do that.
Yeah, yeah.
No?
Yeah, I missed the part of Disney when it was like when I was a kid because I talked to the guy on the show that created Darkwing Duck, and he worked for Disney, doing a lot of their straight to DVD sequels of their big
Right.
properties because that's when
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
Blockbuster and they realized how much money could be made in the
yeah,
rental market, and they
yeah.
went all in on like the like he directed Aladdin 2 and 3, and I think Peter Pan 2 and other ones that come out
Mhm.
at the time, and that was like a fun part where your stories continued, but you just go rent them from the store. You might not go to the theater, but you would get to keep following these stories that way. But that was sort of like a massive part of their, like he said, when that opened up, when they realized like how much money could be made on rental and the amount of money
Mhm.
went into those straight to DVD projects, that was like such a huge part of that. And it seems like they just sort of now you don't need that market anymore. It's just not, you don't need to go to the
No,
store to rent anything. It just all goes on the streamer. And
that's exactly right. And even then, like if I can use sort of a visual metaphor, there's a sort of a kind of a pipeline of product there that sort of makes it a linear pipeline,
mm,
whereas the Disney Plus output
mhm.
is like this amorphous blob that's expanding in all directions at the same time. It isn't just a sequel to Aladdin. It isn't just a sequel to The Lion King or whatever. It's here's a bunch of Star Wars stuff, and here's a bunch of Marvel stuff, and here's a bunch of this, and it's too much. It's sort of like it reaches a point where it sort of blots out your vision, you know.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe I'm taking this stuff too seriously. I don't know, but
Nah, come
I
on.
did reach a point where I was just, oh man, I was just absolutely sick of it, and I didn't want to see any more of it. I'm just like, that's enough. You know, when you're too full, you know.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's true. And so you said let's get into the industry and start making them, right? Uh, yeah. Well, when did you start? Like, were you always drawing when you got into comics?
Yeah, yeah. Like I think the first thing I remember drawing, I loved drawing Spider-Man when I was a kid. I remember a really good drawing of Spider-Man. Oh, none of these survived. All of these have been destroyed, so you'll have to take my word for it.
Okay.
I did a really good drawing of Spider-Man swinging across the rooftops and like a full color and everything. And yeah, so I better fast forward a bit because if I do it like that slowly, this is going to take like three
Oh,
hours.
it's all
But
right. Take your time.
so I was drawing since I was a kid. And uh, so basically, would you like to know how I got into comics? How I got into
Yeah,
making
yeah. Let's
comics?
get there. Sure.
All right. So basically, I've been drawing my entire life, and I moved to Dundee
Mhm.
with a view to making comics, and I ended up getting a job at
Is Dundee like a comic mecca in Scotland? Like, why
it kind of
Dundee?
well, it kind of is. Yeah, yeah, it kind of is. It's the home of British comics.
Mm,
But if you lived here, you wouldn't necessarily know that because the
okay.
people that run those comics, a company called DC Thompson, they're quite circumspect about that, and
Mm,
they don't make as big a deal about it as they should. It really should be like a huge deal. There should be um comics Hollywood
mm,
for Britain, you know, but it's not. But anyway, I ended up working for them, but I was working for them on a women's magazine. I wanted to take this sort of sideways move into and work into comics because they were still publishing comics. But I ended up working at a women's magazine and I loved that job. It was an absolutely fantastic job. But it was really like I had like an hour and a half long lunch breaks and just it was so easy. It was such an easy job and everyone was really nice. But I started getting bored and getting kind of itchy feet. And during my break times, I started drawing again. I started drawing my own comics. And I was living in kind of a sort of small, drafty accommodation at the time, and I didn't have any tech at home at all. So to get this stuff online, like onto drawing board, art forums and DeviantArt and things like that, I would use their kit. I would use their scanners and their computers and so on. And eventually they found out about this and they sacked me.
Oh, oh no.
They canned my ass because not just because of that, because I think they could sense that I wasn't really terribly invested in the job anymore,
Mm.
and I had like a faraway look in my eye, and they were right. I did.
Yeah.
But after a while, they sensed that, and they refused to pay me any money just to sit on my can and do what I want, bastards. But so what I did was I was a bit desperate at the time. I was living with my partner. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I think she said something like, I think she sort of encouraged me to send off a submission to Doctor Who magazine in the UK.
Mhm.
I'm a big Doctor Who fan.
Oh, of
So,
course.
so I did. And it was pretty old school. It wasn't emailed or anything like that. It was like printed out samples and like a proper letter and everything sent in a big packet. And I remember I kissed the envelope and I put it in the post box. And that was on, I think, Monday, and 3 days later, I was having a lie in. I was still in bed. I was absolutely nude, genuinely bollock naked. I was in bed, and I got a phone call, and it was unusual to get. It was a phone call on the landline. It was unusual to get a phone call on the landline, and I had a sense that I knew what it was. I had a feeling. So I kind of dashed out of bed and I raced down the hallway again, still completely nude, and sat in the chair. I'm like, "Hello." And it was the then editor of Doctor Who magazine, a guy called Clayton Hickman, and he said, "We've received your submission. We all really like it." And I couldn't believe it. And then we sat and talked for about an hour, and I was basically having this job interview in the nude. Um,
That's fantastic.
and I didn't tell him that. I wasn't like,
Oh.
by the way, Clayton, I'm naked right now.
It's important. It's important you know this.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, I didn't want to change the sort of the subtle tenor
Mm.
of the conversation.
No, that's fair.
So we just sort of, but we had this lovely long chat, and they were sort of raving about me. And he's a very blunt guy. That he was saying like, "Oh, your heads are too big," and this, that, and the other. I'm like, "Well, all right, that could be fixed." But that was great. And then later that day, I remember I used to publish things on a blog, and on your blog, used to be able to track back who had sort of visited your blog that day using some, I don't know, special science. And I checked, and someone from the BBC had been looking at it. I'm like, oh, bloody hell. So then it all starts to come together, and
Mm.
I end up working for them. And I wrote Doctor Who for them for like a year and a half, and I drew a bunch of strips. But at the same time, I don't know if you remember this, but there used to be, comic book resources.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite the force now that it used to be, but it was a big deal back then when
Oh,
the
I
internet was.
remember. Yeah, that was like
Yeah,
my go-to for
yeah,
for
no, absolutely,
yeah,
me too.
getting
It got me
comic
through
info.
many, many boring days at the job.
Yeah.
Um, but they used to run a competition called Comic Book Idol, where they would sort of like you would submit your art to them, and they would enter you into this contest that lasted for about a month, where your work would be evaluated by, a panel of judges, and people would get knocked out every week. And I think I made it. I think I was one of the runners up, like the third place runner up or something. And this is, oh, I shouldn't say this. This is a shitty thing to say, but I have to say it.
Oh,
The guy that won was incredibly talented. He was a guy called Bill Reed, and he never did anything after that.
really?
It's
Oh
so
no.
weird. Yeah, like you look him up, you can't see him, but he was a very, very talented guy, and he won out. And then people that had come up behind him, guys like Nick Patara, they've gone on to do really well. I've gone on to do pretty well. It's very strange. You can see how you can win a competition and be a big deal and get all these kind of like plaudits and prizes, and nothing materializes. But the good thing about it was, again, because the internet was so much smaller back then, a lot of people suddenly had eyes on my artwork. So
Nice.
Oni Press got in touch, and a guy called Glenn Brunswick got in touch, and that led me to me doing Jersey Gods. So basically, at the same time, I was doing a lot of British work and a lot of American work at the same time. And what a launch! I mean, just what a way to suddenly find yourself on the scene. I think the very next year, I went to do NYCC
Hmm.
and I was sitting in the Image booth with like, there's Rob Liefeld, there's Rich Starkings, there's Frank
Wow.
Cho. Jesus, how has this happened? This is unreal. You know what I
That's
mean? I remember like Rob Liefeld came bounding over to me to look at my artwork, and I was really like starstruck and awestruck. I'm like, and he said to me, I started talking. It's like, oh, you're English. And I said, yeah, for my sins. He went, what? He didn't really understand what I said. And I'm like, nothing. Move on. I think there's a photo of that very moment somewhere,
That's
with him looking sort
awesome.
of baffled.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was really cool.
Yeah.
But what a way to suddenly kind of to sort of find yourself suddenly like it wasn't slow. It went from like nothing to huge like overnight, or it felt huge anyway, you know.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so and I've basically been working um pretty solidly ever since.
Well, I noticed it's listed. Did you write some of the Doctor Who story that you worked
I
on for
did.
the magazine? Okay, cool. Because I
I did.
noticed
I
that.
wrote it for about 18 months, yeah.
So like, did you have much writing experience going into that, or is that just like you're drawing it and write it too, or did they just throw that at you?
No, I was just writing that.
Mhm.
So what got me in was a strip that I kind of wrote and drew myself, just a sample strip, and they wanted
Mhm.
me to expand that and turn it into something more. And unfortunately I couldn't find a way to do that. I wrote one part, and they were like, "Could you make it 4 parts?" I'm like, "I'll try." And I tried, and I submitted loads of kind of attempts, and
Mhm.
none of them really kind of clicked. So I ended up like doing a bunch of other stories. But yeah, I think my first published thing with them was written. And I've always wanted to be a professional comic writer. I've always wanted to kind of crack that side of things. And
Mhm.
I keep trying, like a sort of self-published Dagger, basically, so people would pick up and go, Jesus, this guy can write.
Mhm.
You know, people on that, people in America would sort of like see that, you know,
Yeah.
and it hasn't worked.
Well, hey, keep
But
chugging,
I'm going to
man.
keep going till it does because I am a good writer. I think I'm old enough now where I'm allowed to blow my own trumpet a little bit.
Oh,
I am
that's
a good
topally
writer.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think I remember.
I
Go on,
was,
sorry, go.
oh, I was interested that you chose because I noticed the story was based on Ernest Shackleton that you'd written.
Yes.
So did you have like a root of like, did you have some kind of affinity for that character in history, or is it just something that
No,
you?
no,
Okay,
none whatever. No, I'm a
okay,
terrible fraud. No, I'm an absolute fraud in that way.
it's
I
okay.
remember, I think what happened was my partner bought a book, a very slim volume. It might have been his diary, or it might have been something
Mhm.
else from a bookstore. And she said, and this happens quite a lot. She'd be like, "Why did you do a thing about him?" I'm like, "Oh, all right." And I didn't even read the book. It's disgraceful. I read the
No,
Wikipedia
that's great.
page,
That's
and
great.
oh, it's not great. It's terrible. I mean, what a
Oh,
hack fraud. But
not at all. Like, why does Goddard have to like just like you can read? You don't have to do meticulous research to write good stuff. Like, it's,
no, you have to, I think you have to put in enough. This is terrible cheat, but I think it is true. You have to put in enough plausible details
Mhm.
where it seems to be kind of right, and you have to put a few true details as well. There are a few little details in there, but I don't think people expect or demand that much. I think what people really demand, particularly from that kind of fiction, is thrills
Yeah.
and emotional content, and then if you get the setting kind of broadly right and the feel broadly right, I'm quite good at that. Then everything else is pretty much sort of forgotten. I think we did have to run it past the Shackleton estate to see if
Oh,
they were,
really? That's funny.
yeah, yeah, to see if they were amenable to it, and it portrays him in a very good and heroic light. So it worked out fine. But I do. It turns out actually, I didn't at the time, but it turns out I do actually have an affinity for like nautical things and
Mhm.
ships and stuff. Like
Nice.
that's something that I didn't know that at the time, but it has grown more as I've got older. You know.
Ah.
Um, and I did Sea Dogs for DC Comics, and that had a very sort of nautical kind of
Yes,
flavor
which
as
is
well.
awesome.
Yeah.
I
Oh, thank you.
meant to say, did you work closely with Joe Hill? Because I'm a big fan of him. What was he?
No, not massively, but I think when he works with you, he does get in touch, and he is very nice and he's very approachable. And he sent me a hamper that Christmas, which was just like what a lovely thing to do. I was like a Fortnum and Mason hamper, like full of booze and stuff. Like
Oh
not a little
wow.
one, not like a big one, but still, just like it's like wow, what a cool thing to do. Like I'd never really had that from a kind of collaborator.
Aw, that's lovely.
Yeah, it's that sweet. And then you immediately want to do even better work for him, you know?
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
That Hill House imprint is super cool. I wish they bring that back. I really liked
Yeah.
what he was doing with that. It was cool just getting this. I bought the set that has all of them in the little edition,
Yes.
and
Yeah. Well, see, this is the thing is that I didn't think like I was just doing those as backups, and it was kind of drawn and formatted to really only be a backup. It couldn't really work as
hmm,
excuse me, as a collection. And then they came back to me a couple of years later saying, we are going to, like, they collected all the others, but they hadn't collected mine. And like, we'd like to do that. We'd like to do it in this nice like, slipcase box set. And would you add some little interstitial bits of artwork and, new illustrations, things? Oh, yeah, I'd love to. And yeah, it did come out. It is a nice looking thing. I'm very pleased with it.
oh no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Like I'm a huge fan of your art style. It's really
Oh,
nice,
thank you.
really nice stuff. Um, And like just kind of going through a bit of some of the stuff you worked on. I mean, I love the idea. Like, I guess as a Doctor Who fan, how did it feel to sort of create things that sort of go into the canon? Like I know you created a new
Uh,
companion and stuff like that. Like,
Really, really awesome.
yeah.
Really, really awesome. I think particularly at the time, I think I was high from what was going on for about a month. Like I couldn't come down because I was so excited and I couldn't
Hmm.
believe what was happening. And I couldn't even see a point where the excitement would even diminish. I was so sort of thrilled and
That's
up all the
lovely.
time. Like it's like it's more profound even than being in love. You just sort of feel like a door is opened in your head and all this light has come in. It's incredible. I can't even describe it. But anyway, eventually, of course, the bubble bursts,
No. Yeah.
and particularly you end up like if you sort of want to crash cut from that moment where I feel like I'm sort of illuminated with excitement. Hang on, my partner's just come in. Hi, Dad. I'm on my podcast. Are you all right? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Um, you kind of like if I crash cut from that moment at the beginning where I was really, really excited to about 18 months later when I was writing this one of the Doctor Who strips and I was really near the end, but I was also really near the end of like my energy and my ideas, and I'd written so many at that point. I'd written every single one in a row for like months and months and months. And I was curled up in a ball in bed with the most intractable headache. And Dad's just like, "Are you all right? Are you okay?" I can't do it. I can't write the next part. I can't do it. So eventually, the bloom does go off the rose a little bit, and you end up kind
Yeah.
of facing the reality of it. But you asked me, was it exciting for things to go into the canon? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think particularly at the time because I was such a super Doctor Who fan, I was so into it that kind of. But what I would find is that this little ideas I'd have would be slightly reformatted and turned up in the show. So like there's this in the very first strip that I drew rather, there's this businesswoman called Majenta Pryce and her kind of sidekick, and they're a pair of green-skinned aliens who are running this sort of like sneaky business, and they're sort of protected by a kind of a hologram filter thing. And then like later that year, the Christmas special, the Doctor Who Christmas special came up, and two characters that look and act almost exactly like them turned up in the show, which I found really quite sort of flattering and exciting. But anyway,
Yeah,
um,
no, I noticed because they didn't when Davies took back over and they did those specials, they brought back that Meep character that was only in the
yeah,
that was in the comics originally. So it's kind of cool that
yeah.
they mined the
But the
comics for
problem
that.
is when you say adding things to the canon, that immediately creates a problem because you are. But where does the original Star Beast now stand in terms of continuity? Do you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah,
original,
that is true.
it's been superseded. The TV show always comes first,
Oh, of course,
so it's
yeah.
been superseded by the TV show. But I'm sure Pat Mills and Dave Gibbons were fine with that.
Yeah, I'm sure when the check came, they were happy.
Yeah, it was all.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm sure it worked out fine.
well, I wonder that too because you'd worked on a few projects, like you'd done
Yes.
the Firefly stuff, and you'd worked on Dawn of the
Mhm.
Planet of the Apes, which are all kind of big IPs.
Yeah.
So I guess navigating that, Judge Dredd too, I suppose, navigating that
Yes.
with you know, earlier on with the Doctor Who property probably gave you a little insight into,
It really did. Yeah, there were a couple of little bits of advice. I was lucky enough on Doctor Who to work under two really, really good editors, a guy called Scott Gray and Clayton Hickman, who I already mentioned.
Mhm.
And they were both terrific. And Scott Gray in particular had a really strong sort of kind of visual sense. He's an artist himself. So it was kind of like working with like a sort of British Archie Goodwin because he had a very definite idea about how a page should be laid. And he wasn't prescriptive. He wouldn't tell me exactly how to do it, but he knew what worked and he knew what didn't work.
Mhm.
So there was a great kind of that's a great sort of tutorial phase to find yourself going through. And there was he gave me loads of great pieces of advice, but one great piece of advice he gave me was about getting likenesses right for IP for like Firefly
Mhm.
or Planet of the Apes or whatever. It's like you're not drawing the actor, you're drawing the character.
Mhm.
So if you can catch the character's kind of flair, if you can catch their sort of energy, that will do. That will sort of suffice.
Yeah.
I should talk a bit about Firefly. I know I'm gassing on a bit
No,
here.
no. Well, it's funny you mentioned the likeness thing, because
Yeah,
I talked to someone on the show that worked. Uh, I think a friend of his had worked on the X-Files comics, and
yeah,
or maybe it was him. I can't remember, but he had said how they, because of the likeness issue, you can draw Scully, but you can't draw Gillian Anderson.
yeah, right. Yeah,
So he's like, you have to draw it close enough to Gillian Anderson, but not close enough that they have to, because it'll infringe on them using her likeness rights.
yeah,
So he got fired from the book because Gillian Anderson's people didn't think that the version of Gillian Anderson that wasn't Gillian Anderson he was drawing was attractive enough.
Oh
So
no.
it's like,
Oh no, that's terrible.
I know. So it's,
I have heard a couple of stories like that. I know
yeah.
that when this is sort of the inverse of that story. I know when Peter Davison came into the role of Doctor Who,
Mm,
all Dave Gibbons had to work with was a couple of like really scuzzy photographs of him, like nothing, no good reference at all,
mhm.
and had to basically make up a likeness out of whole cloth. And Peter Davison saw it, or Peter Davison's people saw it, and they didn't like it either. But what happened, they did a really cool thing, is that they got Davison in and took a bunch of great photos of him
Oh, that's
that
sweet.
to use, and just like from now on you'll have this, and that's it. Suddenly they were off to the races, you know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um, I
Oh,
don't think I really got a good likeness on any of the Firefly characters, but I think I got a good likeness of what the characters were like and conveyed what their sort of what their personalities were, what their
mm,
characters were. You know, I have to say, Firefly's a weird one because I'm not even I'm not a fan of Firefly. I think the only thing I knew about it was that we went to see the film Serenity,
yeah.
and I hadn't seen any of the show.
Same
But you
with
know, you're
me. I
bored.
watched the show first, and I loved the
Sure, right,
movie.
yeah, but that would have made more
No, sorry, I
yeah, that
watched
would
the
have made
movie
more
first. I
sense.
watched the movie first. I never saw the
Oh,
show.
you watched the movie? Yeah,
Yeah,
right. So that's
and I went
basically what
back
I
and
did.
watched it after, but I really loved the movie. I felt like
I thought the
they,
movie was great. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I
they,
really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was well written, really exciting. Wasn't entirely clear who everyone was, but it all made enough sense,
yeah.
and it worked. It worked great. So that was really my own exposure to Firefly.
Well, you talk
So
about
they were
moments
like, "Are you
and
a Firefly fan?" I'm like, "Well, no. I am a fan of money and
yeah,
consistent work. I like that."
yes.
But the thing was, I ended up having such a brilliant time on that book. It was so much fun. It was so much fun working with the editorial team and Greg Pak. God, what a writer Greg is. He's such a strong writer. He's like, again, he's one of these guys who really knows how comics work.
Hmm.
And so every script you'd get in would be a delight. And and he's writing basically a team book. It's like the X-Men, you know. He's
Hmm.
got all these plates he needs to keep spinning, and everyone's little subplot has to be of interest. And so working with that, it sort of taught me how to do a team book. That was great. I absolutely loved it. Yeah.
That's
And I ended up
awesome.
kind of coming away as like a Firefly fan.
Well, I was talking to someone, or I think it was in the last episode of the show, about like moments in cinema that sort of, or moments in books or comics that make you
Mm.
like the hair on your back or neck stand up, like something like really,
Yeah.
really like some resonates with you. And the movie, that end sequence where he has that fight with the operative, and then he says, um, you want like when he gets the one up because of the nerve issue he has on him, and he says, you're fighting for a better world. They'll show you a better world. And he shows him the video about how they created the Reavers. And that scene always, for some reason, it lives rent free in my head all the time. That
Yeah.
like that resonance, like this, what happens when you push further, when you try to make everything perfect and you got to control everything and you go too far.
You
And
end up with hell.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Monsters. Like they literally created
Yeah.
monsters. Um, but no, that's cool. That's well, I mean, that working with Greg Pak must have been really, really cool. I mean,
It was
he's
terrific. Yeah. Yeah. I think it was meant to be another writer. And I was quite excited about that. I like working with Boom.
Mhm.
Boom gets some bad press from time to time, but I've always enjoyed working with them, and they've always been nice to me. And I ended up doing good projects with them. And yeah, but then when it was sort of changed to Greg Pak, I'm like, oh my God, we are really off to the races now. This guy, I know this guy rocks. Like I'd
Yeah,
read his Hercules run and his Hulk run, and
yeah.
just fantastic stuff. And then actually working with him again, like I say, you can tell he knows how a comic page works,
Mhm.
how much a comic page can bear in terms of the information on it before it's overwhelmed, before there's no like here's 10 panels and everyone's a crowd scene. Like
Mhm.
there's none of that sort of rubbish. Or I was going to say he won't have you drawing loads of horses, but he actually did. So that's wrong.
Well, I noticed you worked with Irvine Welsh too. Did you have any like? Was it just adapting a story, or did you work with him specifically? Like, did you?
uh God, I don't really remember how that came out. I think someone someone he was kind of close to was a comic fan and had seen my work somewhere and thought I'd be a good fit. And what happened with that is yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And I ended up doing a short strip with him for this sort of one-off anthology, this kind of environmental anthology. I
Mhm.
can't remember what it's called now, unfortunately. The company that publishes it went bust. It ended up getting reprinted in Heavy Metal magazine. But I met Irving Welsh, and we've talked a little bit online, and we're sort of quite friendly. And I ended up doing illustrations for his novel Dead Man's Trousers,
Oh,
and that was
awesome.
really fun. Yeah, that was really, really cool. And it was quite sort of different. He sent me, I was expecting, because in comics you tend to get a fairly kind of formal script that is very, very kind of clear and you can sort of read it. And he sent me this, or maybe one of his people sent me this like handwritten note that was completely illegible. And I didn't know really what he was asking for. And he'd done little doodles. And I didn't want to, you don't want to seem amateur. So I didn't want to come back to him and go, what does any of this mean? I don't understand any of this. So I just kind of like winged it as best I could. And I think I just about got it right, because it's meant to be a hallucinatory experience anyway.
Hmm.
In the book, they take DMT, and they have
Uh,
this kind of peak experience, and then it turns from a book into a graphic novel. It's very, very cleverly done.
oh, that's a
Uh,
very cool idea.
yeah, it is very cool. They sort of go from like one dimension into another, and they become visual.
Wow.
It was great fun to draw. Um, but like I say, I had to sort of make it up because I'm like, I don't know what he's written here. It looks like a betting slip or something. I don't know what I'm looking at.
Well, that's got to
Um,
be one of the more interesting things on the artist side is like trying to, navigate the relationship with the writer in a way that like
yeah,
I'm sure you've worked with so many professionals that it's all there now. But the idea that like, they send that they can push how much gets on a page or, they're really depending on how sparse of a writer they are or how detailed they are, you really have to stretch sometimes to get their image to fit within the format, right? So,
yeah, there is some of that. Yeah, I think you sort of alluded to this though. It's less and less
hmm,
these days. I think the more kind of amateur or like a writer who's just starting out doesn't really understand how much a page can bear,
hmm,
or either underestimate it or overestimate it. So you kind of somehow, but that raises interesting challenges in its own right because you sort of it's up to you then to kind of refine their vision down to something that actually works. You know what I mean? You then have to be the practical one. You have to be the
right.
pragmatist. Um, and so that can be quite sort of I'm not gonna lie, it is frustrating,
Hmm.
but to turn a kind of scrappy bit of script, and again, I should really emphasize this has hardly ever happened to me, but to turn a scrappy bit of script into a page that works and is kind of coherent, I think it's actually only happened to me like twice, and I'm not going to mention any names, but generally most people kind of really, most writers, even guys who are starting out, really, really study these kind of guidebooks on how to write a comic script and they really kind of absorb it and they really want it to be good. And usually they're very amenable to, I haven't really worked with any prima donnas or
No good.
bastards or anything like that who give you any kind of like trouble.
No, that's cool. Well,
Yeah.
I guess that's been resonating in my mind a little bit because like maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, I bought one of those, those ads on Facebook that show up that are like, hey, here's the master class for this person, or the BBC
Yeah.
version's
Yeah.
the Maestro version.
Yeah.
So there was some sale on around Christmas, maybe last year, not this Christmas past, the year before, where I purchased because it was like half price or something, the Alan Moore one.
Mm,
And I just started going through it. Like it took me a year and a half to get to it, but just listening to him sort of talk about the craft and storytelling, and
mm,
then sort of getting to the level of like working with artists and translating it all. It's very interesting and sort of
yeah.
opening my eyes a lot about that's sort of the symbiotic nature of the comic artist sort of thing with the writer. So it's a
Yeah.
very cool thing. I'd suggest if anybody's interested in it out there, it's neat, especially if you're a fan of Alan Moore. Man, open up.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Alan Moore. Yeah. I think I just didn't want to pay any money.
Oh yeah, no, it was
I
it was it was like 20, it was like 80% off. It was like $20. Like
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that's
that's why I got it. I
what's
wouldn't
wrong
have
with
spent it. Well, no, you probably didn't
me?
know about it, but
Yeah,
yeah,
um,
I'm a big Grant Morrison fan as well, and I wish he put one out because I'd love to see
yeah.
his sort
So
of
would
take
I.
on that.
Yeah. I'm actually going through a big Grant Morrison sort of phase right now. I
Nice.
just finished reading. I sort of read them all out of order. I've read all these before, but I read
Oh yes,
Final Crisis and Seven Soldiers,
nice.
and I'm now working my way through their Batman run. I
Right.
think Seven Soldiers might be Grant Morrison's masterpiece. I think it
Yeah.
is such a great. I don't think the artwork is always really up to the sort of the level that it should be, but there's some beautiful art in there, and it's just a stunning piece of work. Like the way he stitches everything together and all the stuff at the end with I don't know if you read Seven
Oh
Soldiers.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I've read
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
there's a bit sort of towards the end where all the kind of plot lines come together, and for a couple of pages, it turns into a newspaper spread,
Yeah.
pages from the Manhattan Guardian, and there's even like a little crossword that helps sort of like resolve the story. It's like this is so cool.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's not just sort of formalistically sort of clever and like wanky. It's
Yeah.
really exciting too. It's really every sort of step propels the plot towards the sort of inevitable end. It's brilliant.
There's been a while since I read it, but I feel like it reminded me. There's this movie that came out last year called uh, I Saw the TV Glow, which is sort of this.
Oh yeah, right. I've
Yeah,
not seen it. I hear it's great though.
it's very interesting. I liked it a lot, but
Yeah.
it's I don't know, it gets lopped in with horror movies. I don't know if I call it a horror movie, but it's certainly very interesting in that sort of like nagging dread and sort of like unrealized life, like living a life that may not be the right one.
Yeah.
And it really reminded me of, I think it might have been Mr. Miracle. I can't remember which
It
one of
is it
those.
is exactly it is
Yeah,
Mr. Miracle.
where
Yes.
it's like
Yeah.
you're living this life and then it might not, like you're not sure if it's you or if it's something else, and then like
Yeah, that's right.
and
Darkseid
then
calls it the life trap.
yeah, and then like at
Life
the end
trap.
when,
Yeah.
because it all kind of comes circle in the big issue that wraps up all the miniseries, but
Yeah.
it ends in such a down note where you're like he
Yeah.
gets shot in the head and it's just
Yeah.
like it's done and you're like, oh my God, like it just
That's
was
right. How
such
did you get out of
a,
this?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was such
That is
a,
such a great. I literally
yeah,
just read that issue earlier today. It
yeah,
is awesome, and because he does get shot in the head, and all you hear is Motherbox going ping, ping,
yeah,
ping, ping, and that's it. And at the end, his two hands coming out of the grave, like
yeah,
he's escaped death, he's escaped life. It's so cool. But
yeah,
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. It sort of strobes through all these different lives he could have had.
yeah.
Either like he gets burned to death, and he gets burned up and he kills himself,
Mhm.
or he lives this sort of happy life, or he becomes like a security guard, and it's really, really nicely done. Really, really
Yeah.
cool stuff.
Well,
I would also like to see Grant's process. That would be pretty cool.
I've read his like the Super Gods book, and I haven't read
Yeah.
his novel Luba that came out a few years ago.
No.
It's on my list. But yeah, I mean, for him, it was Animal Man is what brought me to the party.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
me
I've always
too.
been a big animal fan and like just lover of animals in general. You probably saw a few cats running around.
I
Um,
did. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but they like it just that. I guess just seeing issues that were so close to me even as a kid, like you know what I mean? Comics always seem so big. It's always a world
Yeah.
destroying monster versus your hero, but like where someone fighting like against dolphin harvesting or
Yeah.
it just made it more on a much more bare bones sort of lower level that were
Yeah.
issues that
Yeah.
resonate with me in my day-to-day life, and I just felt like he
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
and plus the
I think he's
whole
almost more like a Marvel hero in that
yeah.
respect. Like he's got or certainly the classic sort of Stan Lee,
Mhm.
Ditko, Kirby idea of a Marvel hero, where he's got money troubles and he's got a
Yeah.
family. It's what they call street level, you
Yeah,
know?
he's trying to make his kids be vegetarians too, and his son doesn't
Yeah,
want to. Like
yeah,
it's all
yeah,
very real world stuff. But
yeah,
I,
and very good sort of observation of a domestic life as well. You know,
yeah,
like not something you really see in comics that much, or in fiction generally, I think. But so he's happily married, and that's part of the kind of the story. Yeah, Animal Man's great. I remember, the iconic moment when
he
he
looks at
can
us.
yeah, you can see
Yeah,
the author. Yeah, I remember I was sitting in a train station in Redruth in Cornwall, very, very little town in Cornwall. It was a beautiful, bright, sunny day, and I just bought my comics. I think these were sort of like back issues. I think it'd come out a little while before this. And I was sitting on this bench reading, and I got to the "I can see you" bit, and it was a warm day, and I felt a chill go down my spine because it was just this real sort of thrillingly strange moment. And his face on the page, it
yeah,
can't be, but it looks almost as big as your face.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
this
oh yeah.
it's staring back at you. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well,
And
that
the way
kind
he
of
seeded that in so kind of slowly and carefully via the Native American character and the coyote and all that
right.
sort of stuff. It's brilliant stuff.
Well, that whole Coyote Gospel episode too, where it's like
Yeah,
the whole that thing, and I mean even when, I mean, spoiler alert, but it's an old comic, when his family's murdered by that hitman, and then like he kind of
yeah,
goes into that dark place and kind of
yeah,
takes the guy apart piece by piece.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
dark, and then going to this world where all the like all the characters go, which I
yeah. The
find really
limbo. Yeah,
yeah, which I find really funny because like Mr. Freeze is like there, he's just like a nonsense
yeah.
character that nobody cared about. This is
Yeah, yeah. It's
before
like
like
I used to be a big deal. I
yeah.
was on I was on the TV.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
this is before the animated series sort of reinvented him and
Yeah,
gave
like
him the
turn him
cool
into it.
origin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Now he's awesome. You wouldn't
yeah,
kind of dare cross Mr. Freeze. I've
yeah.
had to fight Mr. Freeze in like Arkham Knight. Arkham,
Oh,
no, Arkham Asylum. He was a pain in
oh,
the ass,
oh, yeah. He was the real. Yeah, he
Yeah, it
sucked.
was
I
really
hated him.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's a
but
great, yeah. I think that comic features one of the best depictions of like grief
Yeah.
I've ever seen in a comic book. Like he's got the time machine on his back, but he can't see it. He can only feel it. And he's
Right.
talking about it as this kind of weight on his back, and
Mm.
he looks exhausted and dragged down,
Yeah.
and he has to go on this sort of terrible kind of quixotic quest where he meets all these immortals, and they're all annoying pricks.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And he has to sort of put up with it. It's a really like, and no one understands him, and no one's listening to him, and he's sort of flitting through his own memories, and then he eventually reaches rock bottom, and then he meets God, and
Yeah.
God tells him it's all a joke,
Yeah.
and oh God, it's just fantastically
And
good
when he
stuff.
like asks him to bring back his family, and he's like, "Well, that would be good
Yeah,
writing," like he
yeah,
just,
that's right. Yeah,
like
it would. He says it wouldn't be realistic.
yeah, yeah. And then he
Yeah,
said, "Can't you just
comics are
make?"
realistic now.
It was so touching, like when he's like, "Can't you just make it all a dream?" And he's like, "Well, that's a cop out." And then like at the end,
Yeah,
he does make it a dream, and he has that moment
yeah.
where he flashed the light. Ah, it's just beautiful writing.
Oh
But
yeah, the light on the hillside. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good. And the light flashes back. That
yeah.
is
When he
so
walks
great.
away, it flashes back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's magic right there. Yeah,
I still
yeah.
think
Maybe that's Grant Morrison's opus. I don't know. It's very, very good.
for me, it's hard to tell. There's so many good ones,
Yeah,
like the Doom Patrol's up there, but the one I think that
yeah,
most people don't talk about enough, and I think is genius, is the Phil. Um,
yeah.
that one, I don't know why it hit me the way it hit me, but it for some reason that one really really resonated with me. So
I need to see. I need to read that again. I think my impression of it is that the artwork is so great.
oh yeah,
It's almost overwhelmingly good.
yeah,
You know, like if you compare it to I love the artwork in Animal Man, but it's much more raw
yeah.
and
It's
bare bones.
traditionally 80s kind of
It
comic
is,
kind of look.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of engage with the material weirdly a little bit better, I think, because because it's a bit more kind of spare. And then but then the filth is like information overload. The writing is really dense, the artwork is really dense. So it's like it never really I read it, but it's never really taken in my hindbrain, you know what I mean? It's never really
Mm,
kind of locked in there.
mm. Well, what's next for you? What projects you got coming out that you can discuss?
Well, I just wrapped Shazam, my run on Shazam for DC Comics. That was
Nice.
awesome. Really, really fun. I came on for one issue and then I ended up doing, I think, six issues. And it was just working with Josie Campbell, great. Just every script again, just an absolute joy. Brilliant, brilliant fun. Really, I sort of take the piss out of this phrase online because it's become such a cliche, but a lot of humor and a lot of heart. But they say that about everything these days, so it's sort of become meaningless. But it did have a lot of humor and it did have a lot of heart, you know. So I love doing that. And then next, I'm doing a World's Finest annual
Oh, cool.
that ties in with the next big DC event, which is not the Summer of Superman, but the other one. It's called We Are Yesterday. It's being sort of overseen by Mark Waid and Christopher
Oh,
Cantwell.
wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that is very exciting. Yeah, so I'm going to be starting that. I'm going to be starting thumbnailing that next week. And after that, I don't know. It's sort of in the lap of the gods. Hopefully, I would like to do more DC work. And if I don't do more DC work, I've got a project in the pipeline that I would like to make for myself. I'd like to do another thing like Dega. I'd like to do another thing that I write and draw myself. Um, and maybe something for Oni Press. So loads of stuff, but I don't know. We'll have to see how all these tariffs work out. It might be
Right.
that I might end up doing nothing.
Well, I think you're in England safe. It seems like only us and Mexico are the ones that they're
Yeah.
really going after.
Well,
But
yeah, but I mean the cost of printing is going to go up, and it
oh,
might,
that's true. Yeah.
let's absolutely smash that sort of the margins are thin enough as they are, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But my feeling is that the tariffs were being was a bit of saber rattling to get them to sort of toughen up on border policy. Anyway, sorry, we're talking about politics
No, no,
again.
it's funny because everything that the Mexican government gave and the Canadian government gave was exactly what we were doing before. So,
Yeah, yeah.
like it's
Well,
literally nothing has changed.
no, that's the man to a T. He
Yeah.
doesn't even care if he gets a better deal, as
Yeah.
long as he can say he took credit for the deal, as long as he can
Exactly.
say his deal. If he can say it's Trump's this or Trump's that, that's what he likes. If he can put his name on it, then he's happy. It won't be a Biden thing. I
Yeah.
wonder if he misses Biden. I bet he does a little bit.
Yeah.
I
He
think
has no to blame
likes,
now.
yeah, exactly. And I think he likes I think the two of them like sparring with each other.
Hmm.
Um, Anyway, sorry, don't end on that
No,
note.
it's all good. It's all good. But I look very forward to what the next projects are, man. And
Thank you
this
very
is
much.
this
Thank you
is a
for
great conversation, man. This is really
Yeah, I
fun.
really had fun. It didn't really go the way I thought it would. It was completely bonkers.
This is how I do it. I just like it. I
That's
feel
cool.
like getting a feel for you as a person is like way better just to have a conversation
I
than
agree. I think that's what I'd
asking
rather
some-
do anyway, because it
yeah.
makes it that bit harder to rehearse beforehand as well.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't
I,
really sort of guess what's going to come.
yeah, I don't need a canned answer. That's fine.
No, that's
Well,
right.
hopefully
Yeah.
I'll make it back to Scotland someday. Maybe I'll meet up with you in Dundee. That sounds like it'd be
Well,
awesome.
let me know. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be fun. I will say before we go, there's this funny thing where the way your guitar is placed is play. Can you see yourself on the
Oh
screen?
yeah.
It sort of looks like a little icon in the corner of a guitar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does too. That's really
It
funny.
does, right?
One of the
Like one of those
funniest.
old flashing, those old rotating GIFs you used to get on like old websites. It's got that sort of.
Yeah, that's true. That is.
Oh well.
That's really funny. It's funny because I sometimes put little blurbs of these up just as with the conversations as reels to sort of just promote the episodes. And
Yeah.
I don't get a lot of comments from like YouTube or anything from just general people that come across it in their feeds.
Mhm.
But somebody made a comment about the guitar, and someone also made a comment about there was some guy that used to be he was like a spokesman for Sprint or something,
Mhm.
and then he committed suicide. And
Oh,
somebody commented, the guy in the bottom, which was me, looks like that Sprint guy that offed himself. And I was
oh
like,
my
great.
God, man.
Yeah, I know. I said, well, I'm a good
Well, don't
compliment.
ever move the gutar because it's perfectly positioned right
All
there. It
right,
really,
perfect.
it looks uncanny.
I'll never play
Yeah, just leave it.
it.
Just leave it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Dan. It's a blast.
That's my pleasure.
All
Take it
right,
easy,
man.
Andre.
You too. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.
There you have it, my conversation with Dan McDaid. Man, I hope you had as much fun listening to that as I did having it. As I said, we connected, clicked right away. Lots of laughs and a great conversation. What a career. And lots more cool stuff to come. So check out the Shazam book that just ended. Check out what's next for him, which is probably available out there now. But yeah, get on it, because Dan's a cool guy. And we got to support our comic industry. We got to support our creators, our artists, our writers, and especially the ones that we like. And Dan is such a cool guy, such a great conversation, great personality, and was very open for this conversation, which I'm always very appreciative of. You know, you don't want to feel like you're just asking canned questions. I'm not like, comic book resources or one of those things. They're just doing a point-by-point questionnaire to get enough for an article. I just want to talk. I want to learn about you from you. And Dan certainly understood the assignment, as the kids say. Even that's probably a data reference. But but he did, and we had a great conversation. So big thanks to Dan. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in. Be sure to do so again next week when I have my conversation with Barbara Randall Kessel, who was a very great chat. Editor for many, many comics, a writer as well, and worked for DC, worked for Dark Horse, worked for all kinds of places, and there's something exciting on the horizon. She couldn't talk about while we chatted, but I'm very excited to see what that's going to be. And what a lovely chat as well. So be sure to tune in next week to my conversation with Barbara Kessel. In the meantime, stay safe, have fun, read some comics by Dan McDaid, and go check out some Barbara Kessel comics too. To prep up for that conversation. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.